I first heard about Sadako Sasaki in 1985 when I visited Peace Memorial Park during a trip to Japan. And we stayed at a very nice hotel right next door to the park that marks the epicenter of where the atomic bomb exploded. And so while I was there, I walked around the park a few times, and I saw her memorial, which is a statue of this young girl holding a golden origami crane. And it's surrounded by cranes that have been brought or sent there from all over the world by people who were inspired by her message of peace. And then I looked into her story a little bit deeper 5 years ago when the Land Museum featured that exhibition of works by Tony Etherong that Sensei Michelle mentioned. And the title of that, by the way, was Winds of Change, Totem for Sadako. And it occurred to me at the time that the mushroom cloud and the cranes that moved on the wind and all of that were a really interesting metaphor for the kinds of winds of change that blow through every life. I thought about Sadako again a couple of weeks ago. I was at the Todo Institute in Vermont doing a residential program toward a certification in Japanese psychology. And the program is highly experiential, so we were assigned to do the kinds of things that we might later ask clients to do if we were counseling with them. And one day, some of us were assigned to fold origami cranes. So as you learned a few minutes ago, this is an exercise in attention. It's also a way to work with staying true to purpose despite potentially unpleasant feelings that may arise, like frustration and things not working out the way you expect them to work out, and anxiety about whether or not we can succeed at something new. And those kinds of mental phenomena, frustration, anxiety about failure, worry about how others might view us, things like that often arise in our minds when we set out to try something unfamiliar or do something difficult. And our ability to succeed or even to continue with any real determination is proportional to our ability to coexist with these unpleasant feelings and let our actions be guided by our purpose rather than be stalled by our emotions. I actually wasn't given that particular assignment, by the way. When I was asked if I'd ever folded an origami crane, I said, yes, I once helped fold a couple thousand of them. And so they gave me something else to do. But sitting at the dinner table that night, I was looking at another student's origami, and I remembered Sadako's cranes. And thinking of her in that context, I think I know why her story is so compelling to so many people. Of course, it's a sad, innocent child. Despite being a good student, friendly person, determined athlete, dies as a result of a war that she has nothing to do with. But there's another message too. We have a human being dealing with unfair conditions, experiencing a hopeless personal tragedy and enduring remarkable physical pain. And she sets her mind on a purpose and moves inexorably toward it despite its apparent impossibility. So hopefully none of us will ever have to go through anything like Sadako did. But no life escapes the winds of change. Each of us will see many tragedies, national, international, personal. Some are of our own making, some we can attribute to other people, some are the work of nature or natural causes. We can't control nature. We can't control other people. We can't control our past. But whatever causes these disasters, we still have to respond to. And if we're to remain on firm footing in the face of these winds of change and respond to them skillfully, then we need the ability to let feelings happen to us as they will, and to keep steering our actions toward our purpose. So as Rita mentioned earlier, one of the worst disasters to hit this country started to take shape on this date a decade ago. A tropical cyclone began forming off of Africa's west coast. And it never strengthened, but it became a contributor to the formation of Tropical Depression 12, which eventually became Hurricane Katrina. And by the end of the month, it had become a Category 5 storm. New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin ordered the first ever evacuation of the city and called Katrina the storm that most of us have feared. And as you know, the next day, seawalls failed, New Orleans was flooded, the coast of Mississippi and Alabama were devastated. And many, many people reacted to this event with heartfelt compassion. Busloads of people, including some people that I knew, went to the Gulf Coast to help with relief efforts. And a lot of people donated money. And whether directly affected or not, I suspect that almost everyone in this room identified with the suffering involved in the wake of this disaster and probably helped out in some way. But there was also a lot of anger that arose at this time. Anger is kind of understandable. There have been mistakes made that contributed to the devastation. But again, the past is one of those things that we can't control. And anger in a situation like that is essentially a futile attempt to change something that's already happened. I'm not going to tell you you shouldn't get angry about things like this. Anger arises as part of the karmic baggage that we bring with us into this life. It would be nice if we could prevent the arising of unskillful thoughts and feelings like anger, anxiety, depression. It doesn't work that way. But emotions like this are sort of like stray cats. If you don't feed them, they go away. You give them some attention, something to chew on, they hang around for a while, and then they keep coming back. We can't control whether a particular stray cat comes over or not, but we can decide on how we act when it shows up on our porch. And that includes making the choice whether to feed it or refrain from nurturing it. I've noticed that sometimes when I talk about anger specifically, the people that kind of don't want to give it up, they fear that if they don't nurture their anger, they won't feel like doing anything about whatever it is that they're unhappy about. And one problem with that point of view is that if you only do something when you feel like it, you're not going to get much done. You know how it goes. Most of you have had careers or still have careers, and you probably don't wake up every morning feeling like going to work, but you do it anyway. And as compassionate people, we don't ignore an event like Katrina. But we don't want to let ourselves be blown away by our reactions to it. So we can balance our emotions with physical action. And that way we can return our minds to equanimity, but we don't have to return our bodies to complacency. So if you're concerned about an injustice, about the environment, about peace, and rather than being angry or anxious about it, make a commitment to it. Incorporate it into your life's purpose. Most of the catastrophes that most of us will experience in life are not caused by hurricanes or atomic bombs or even presidential candidates. Most of our disasters are screw-ups at work, difficult family relationships, investment losses, projects that we need to complete but don't really want to do, things like that. And the mechanism of working with those catastrophes is really the same as working with the big disasters. Accept what's happening, accept the way you feel, do what the circumstance calls for. And then when the storm has blown over, the work that we've done still stands, and it's there to help us weather the next storm. As most of you know, quite a few people come to me to learn how to meditate. And I'll often ask them, well, what are you hoping to accomplish with it? And the most common answer is, I want to have inner peace. Well, I have inner peace. I don't know if I have more of it than the average person, but I know that I have more of it than I had 10 years ago, and I have a lot more of it than I had 20 or 30 years ago. But I also have inner emotions that are not particularly peaceful. I try not to hang on to them too long, but things like anger and anxiety, and even feelings of discouragement and hopelessness come up once in a while. And that's okay. Inner peace is pleasant, but it's not really all that useful. Unpleasant emotions, on the other hand, are a side effect of being a caring human being. If you're anxious about giving a talk, then that's a sign that you care about how well you do. If you're sad when you think about a friend passing, that's because you care about other people. So you don't have to try to get rid of unpleasant feelings. If you don't feed them, they go away on their own anyway. But accept how you feel, and then shift your attention from your feelings to your purpose. The purpose is still going to be there with you after your feelings have gone off to somebody else's front porch. Now this has practical value, but it also has spiritual value. The process of coexisting with unpleasant feelings and staying on purpose is one of the things that we work on when we meditate. And if you were to decide to become a Buddhist and go for refuge and take the precepts, you need those kinds of skills when things come up, like the urge to participate in office gossip and that sort of thing. In Zen Buddhism, there's the idea that you'll hear about of living naturally. And that doesn't mean that you do whatever you feel like doing. It simply means that you don't assume that there's something wrong with you when you feel anxious or when you get discouraged. You go ahead and feel the way you feel, and then you do what you came here to do. Purpose can evolve, by the way. We don't have to cling to it when the winds of change suggest a revision. In fact, we want our purpose to be focused but fluid. Otherwise, it's not a purpose anymore, it's just an ideology. We want our minds to be flexible enough to adapt to circumstances as they change. And sometimes that change comes from within. About this time 10 years ago, I realized that my own purpose actually needed to change because my spiritual practice had changed the way I was relating to the world. Sensei Michelle and I, well, neither of us were senseis at the time, but we had driven over to Tampa Bay with another Buddhist friend to participate in the 60th anniversary Hiroshima Remembrance Service. And this was a nice low-key event in a park near the St. Pete Pier. It had been arranged by Buddhist Peace Fellowship, and there were also members of the Society of Friends, the Quakers, and Pax Christi, which is a Catholic peace and justice movement. At the time, I was working full-time as a freelance writer, and one of my standing commitments involved writing an opinion column for an alternative punk rock-oriented magazine. And it might surprise you to hear this, but my creative process at the time included several days of getting myself really riled up so that I could rant for a couple of thousand words about the Bush administration or whatever else I was mad at the time. So at the end of August, I had a column due. And so this was just a few weeks after the Hiroshima observance and within days of Hurricane Katrina's landfall. And as I sat down to write and I started thinking about what was going on in the world, I realized that spending a bunch of time getting myself really angry no longer aligned with the way I wanted to spend my time in this body. So I came up with a new title for my column. I called it Shadows on the Sidewalk. The title came from something that I had seen at Peace Memorial Park all those years before. In the museum there was something that I will never forget seeing. The granite steps from the front of a bank next to where the bomb blast occurred. There had been people on those steps. And the heat from the blast had vaporized them. The heat had been so intense that it turned the granite white except where the people had been. And it left the shadows of these unknown individuals outlined on the stone. Shortly after I wrote that column, the magazine ceased publication. And it actually turned out to provide a kind of a nice poetic shift from one purpose to another, as I went from being an angry radical to someone who was really dedicated to Buddhist practice. That angry radical is still in there, by the way. I just keep him on a short leash. But there's an interesting thing that happens when you start living according to your purpose, and I think Sadako's example is a really good demonstration of this. She started out folding cranes because a friend told her that if she folded 1,000 of them, she'd be granted a wish. And so I suppose you could say that her initial purpose was to get this wish to have her cancer be cured. But as she saw the effect that what she was doing was having on others, and she realized she was going to die soon no matter how many cranes she folded, her purpose broadened. She was not deterred by the impossibility of her purpose. Instead, toward the end, her wish became a wish for the benefit of others, not just for herself. I can't tell you what your purpose should be, of course. If you're a Buddhist, though, you might have started out practicing hoping that you'd achieve your wish of inner peace for yourself. And then with time and with practice, that purpose starts to grow, and your wish begins to bear some fruit And as that happens, you realize you don't want to be enlightened all by yourself. You want it for all beings. So, for one human being to liberate all beings is an impossible task. But that's okay, because when your purpose grows like that, what you actually do becomes more tightly focused. You just have to breathe this one breath, observe this one precept, give this one Dharma talk. There's a quote from Sadako at the base of her memorial that I think reflects what she probably had in mind as she was folding the last of her origami cranes. I will write peace on your wings and you will fly all over the world. And that's exactly what happened. Her purpose was a huge, impossible one, to save all children from dying in war. But from moment to moment, her purpose took shape in one tiny, focused task, to fold just one crane. So thank you for your attention.